Good morning. It is December 10th. We're here for our regular scheduled commissioner meeting. I'd like to welcome the new commissioner, Mr. Stephen Bauman. And at this point in time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please rise and join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point in time, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to move the appointment of the new Franklin County Commissioner Chair to the first order of business. Is there a second?
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So at this point in time, I'd like to make a motion that Commissioner Mullen be the chair of the Franklin County Commission.
I'll second that.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Now we need to make a motion for the co-chair.
Commissioners, I would make a motion that, as an appointed commissioner, that elected Commissioner Clint Didier would be Chair Pro Tem.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I think at this time, that should have been your call, because you're the chair. So welcome.
Thank you.
All righty.
So are you wanting me to chair this meeting today or
Yes,
next week?
yes, you are now the
Alright.
official chair, and the next order of business is the vouchers.
Chair Mullen, permission to speak. I just want to congratulate you first of all, but a suggestion, and this is a suggestion that we should probably do and codify within our agenda, but to approve, make a motion to approve this agenda and all future agendas, obviously, but if you guys could do that to approve this particular agenda as a body.
I move that we approve this agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Been
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to public comment.
We got to do the vouchers yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. And we have 2 vouchers today.
Yes.
That's fund expenditures.
Okay, there it is. Okay, gotcha. Haven't done this, so it's new to me.
So fund expenditures and then salary.
All right, I move for the approval of the fund expenditures in the amount of $108,110.93, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 members of the Auditor's Office and our Franklin County Administrator.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Next, we have the payroll and clearing. And I move for the approval of the salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $1,193,047.30 as presented, and noted that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the Auditor's Office.
All in favor, say aye.
Did we have a second?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. Aye.
All right.
Moving on to public comment. Is anyone for public comment? You have 3 minutes.
Commissioners, on October 2nd, 2023, Captain Cheryl Brunk of the Franklin County Sheriff's Office was ordered to attend training in Blaine, Washington. This training is necessary for her to fulfill her duties and for the county. And the decision to send her to this training was made by me, the elected sheriff. On October 26th of 2023, Cheryl's necessary travel reimbursements were submitted to the auditor's office for repayment. It was her money. It was rejected because her travel fell outside of the hourly limitations set by the auditor. After repeated attempts to resolve this issue with the auditor, to no avail, I had an ASR submitted on January 5th of 2024 so this matter could come before the board for decision at the January 9th, 2024 meeting. The same way I have brought similar situations to this board back in August and in June. The ASR was submitted using regular and customary processes for all matters to come before the Board of County Commissioners. It was also done after repeated attempts to rectify this issue through the County Administrator's Office and meetings with two of the commissioners individually to brief them on the situation. Behind closed doors, everyone seems to be in agreement that Cheryl should be reimbursed her money, except for Commissioner Didier. The ASR was accepted by the County Administrator's Office. On January 8, 2024, I was notified that Commissioner Didier was refusing to allow this matter to be placed on the agenda for public consideration. It was then suggested that I instead bring it up during the regular elected business agenda item of the meeting as a way to circumvent. On January 9th at approximately 9:05, the agenda was published to the public. The agenda items was indeed, and these agenda items were not on the agenda, the elected officials business section that has been on the agenda since February 28th of 2023. This was done specifically to restrict my ability to bring this important issue before the board in a matter that affects us all, and for you to take action. My request to you is simple: stop restricting speech. Make a motion, a second to the motion, and vote to have the matter reinstated on the agenda so that I may speak to the wrongdoings levied against a dedicated, hardworking employee with 30-plus years of experience in the Franklin County Sheriff's Office.
There'll be a second time for public comment. Please limit your speech
No, I'm
to 3
done,
minutes.
thanks.
All right, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Anyone on the phone? All right. Moving on to consent agenda.
Chairman,
Yes.
I move to approve the consent agenda, items 1 through 5 as presented.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving consent agenda items 1 through 5, please notify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's passed. Moving on to regular items of business. .09 committee recommendations presented by Stephen McFadden, Port of Pasco Director of Economic and Development.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Congratulations to the most.
Thank you.
So, as you know, the port, on behalf of Franklin County, served as staff support for a number of years. Actually preceded my arrival here as the port. Follow the existing Franklin process for the 2009 projects to recommend. I provided a number of documents for your review. Have you? So I don't have to dig. Typically, we meet in April. The committee then does a call for proposal to all the eligible agencies for projects that they may have that meet the economic development benchmark. State law. Sorry about that. This year, based on that change in the state law, that extends the .09 program to 2054. The committee wanted to have a more extended conversation about the ability to actually bond against those future .09 revenues. And to give you a really good example of why, you're all familiar with the Darigold project that the port was able to attract to the Ryman Industrial Center. In 2020, we estimated it would cost about $15.5 million to upgrade Railroad Avenue, install 20,000 lineal feet of municipal water line, construct almost 7,000 feet of rail, and also install the sanitary sewer lines necessary to serve Darigold. 3 years later, that cost ballooned to $24+ million. And so as you can see, we've been facing public infrastructure cost escalation for quite some time. Partially back then driven by COVID, and today really driven by the general cost of things. So after several meetings with Administrator Gonzalez joining us, and then also Derek Broughton for the last meeting, we conducted a series of meetings and then met in December on the 7th to consider a path for a recommendation to the county commissioners, which is why we're here today. So typically we provide you a written memo of the committee's recommendation, and I come before you to present on that. Because of the bond discussion, I'll also be joined, if you have questions, by Port Executive Director Randy Hayden, who has worked frequently with Foster Garvey, our bond counsel, and can speak to the recommendations that they're making. The committee, the .09 committee's official recommendation is twofold. First, they recommend that the county use $5 million of the current uncommitted funds immediately to make the HVAC improvements to the HAPO Center as needed, and that they continue to renew their annual investment in TRIDEC, the Associate Development Organization. And as you know, in the state law, funding for the ADO is considered a normal and regular portion of the .09 program. Then additionally, we're here to make a recommendation that you support a series of 3 projects that are large-scale, long-term economic development infrastructure projects. And in order for those to proceed, they would best benefit from the funding through the bonding process because they are larger dollar projects. And I will point out just, for the official, vote count, it was a 4-to-1 vote of the 5 voting agencies that were available, with Franklin County voting no. The recommended bonding mechanism that we'll speak to later is an interlocal agreement between the county and the cities and the port that would dedicate a certain portion of those future .09 collections to those individual agencies based on the funded project. And the mechanism would relieve the county from incurring indebtedness or financial risk from the other agencies' bonds. And as I said, Randy can speak to that in detail. So what I will do is, if you don't mind, I'll just reference the projects that we're recommending for commission support for funding. And then you can either ask me questions or we can move on to the discussion around the actual bonding function. So we had a total of 9 potential projects submitted to us in our request for information from the eligible public agencies. 1 from the city of Connell and North Franklin County, 4 potential projects from the city of Pasco, 1 from Franklin County, the HAPO Center, and 3 from the Port of Pasco. In our deliberations, the group felt that there were a handful of those projects that really met the threshold and the definition of legitimate economic development projects. And I did include the updated state law for you in your packet, so you can even reference that if need be to see what the definitions are of economic development and project types that are eligible for funding. So in addition to proposing funding for the HAPO Center and for TRIDEC, we are also recommending a $5 million funding piece for the city of Connell for the Connell Commercial Track improvements. The proposed project will facilitate commercial development within approximately 2.5 acres of undeveloped privately owned property and 7.2 acres of city-owned property. And just to speak to this as an economic developer, these lots have the potential to be shovel-ready commercial, heavy commercial sites inside the city limits at Connell. And it is a real challenge for rural cities and towns to find potential projects. This $5 million investment is really a small one in the grand scheme of things when you consider the number of businesses that they could potentially site there and the amount of job creation that comes from that private development. The second project that's seeking $7.5 million is the City of Pasco and the Lewis Street Corridor Phase 1 Downtown Redevelopment Project. The proposed project will leverage the investments already made, more than $44 million on both ends of the corridor project. It will enhance accessibility and multimodal transportation, and it will create a safe, clean, and welcoming downtown Main Street. This is a long time coming, and as you know, the Lewis Street overpass was a huge multi-year, multi-decade lift for the city of Pasco. This carries on that work and delivers it right to the core, the heart of downtown Pasco, and that goes to the support of existing and future small businesses. The Port of Pasco's request, the one that I know best about, is for $10 million. As you know, we have a 50-acre site near the cable bridge. We refer to it as the Wharf Redevelopment Project. And the leading piece of that project would be rehabilitation of a 230-foot timber wharf dock and the creation of the road and utility infrastructure necessary to make the site ready for mixed-use redevelopment. While the port itself does not construct housing, we are able to prepare land sites for mixed-use development as long as it has a commercial influence to it, and we have the job creation that comes from that. And because the site has some light industry zoning in place, we can also welcome small shop industrial operations, almost similar to some of the things we have there now, just at a little bit larger scale. So that project also provides a tourism opportunity, which I think you can tie directly to the Hapo Center if you choose, in that we currently do not have a formal location for the cruise ships on the river system to dock and disembark their passengers. And so for them to come to Pasco, they're coming here by bus. This is the prime location. It's been looked at by the cruise ship companies in the past. They simply do not have the resources to fully fund the redevelopment of that dock. In our grand vision, we feel that project would ultimately serve those cruise ships and also serve as a destination point that leads them to the rest of the great aspects of the city of Pasco. That's all I have. If you have questions for me, or we can ask Randy to come up and talk about the bonding process.
Any questions?
You stated that you had one dissenting vote, and it was Franklin County's vote.
Correct.
The reason why?
You would have to ask Derek Broughton, but I believe the explanation was that the county was not taking a supporting position of bonding future .09 revenues.
And the reason why we were not in position for that?
I think it relates to risk, first
Yes.
off,
Yep. We'd be taking all the risk.
which is why I think it's a good opportunity for us to maybe talk about the Foster Garvey assessment that really lifts some of that risk off the county's shoulders.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Any other?
Could I ask a couple questions? I had a couple of questions about some of the different projects.
Sure.
Like on the Trideck one, and you have to forgive me, I'm brand new
Happy
to this
to-
role. Could you give us an example of what lead generation looks like? How does that manifest itself?
So Whitaker and Associates is a company that can do specific research on behalf of an economic development agency who is looking to target an industry sector. So let's take aerospace, which is the latest and greatest thing on my plate for the airport. So we work with TRIDEC on securing leads to bring to Franklin County. And as the Regional Associate Development Organization, TRIDEC provides that same service to all of the economic development entities, all the cities, the counties, the port districts in the Tri-Cities region. This research is really critical to us when we're picking a specific targeted industry sector to go after. Food processing is the most familiar one for Pasco and Franklin County. It identifies companies that are currently actively posturing for expansion or new development in new areas. It also gives us direct contact, verifiable contacts to the companies on how to make those cold call approaches. And I'm sure you know what a cold call experience can be like. So this is really very helpful.
So this could be summarized to say this is roughly our proportionate share to a much larger vision and project.
Right. Most of the public agencies are all funding TRIDEC and funding different elements of TRIDEC. So the Port of Pasco invests $35,000 a year. The county has traditionally invested this $25,000 amount in support of TRIDEC, and then each of the municipalities are in at $30,000 or $35,000 as well.
Okay. Then in the City of Connell project, as I read through that, wondered if I could get some more clarification. So it's about 9.7 acres, and with the request, that's over $500,000 per acre for development.
So you're talking about?
That's a piece of my question, and the other piece is the private property owner that, are they participating to some level? Is this number actually larger and they're proportionately sharing a piece of that?
I can't see over my shoulder to see if Mayor Barrow is in the room. However, we may have Public Works. There you are. Yep. Hey, Lee. So the one thing that I agree, so the reference to the privately owned land, that those developments are not really where we're aiming the county's funds for. We're aiming it toward the land that's owned for the city, and that's water, sewer, and roads, and those things have really gone up in price, as you know, lately. So we also believe that these projects are important in North Franklin County because they're few and far between, and this is a bird in hand that we've been talking about for a couple of years.
That was the reason for the question, is I'm not familiar with spending that kind of money per acre on infrastructure or anywhere close to that.
Sometimes in public agency economic development, it doesn't meet the same return on investment analysis, although we try to make those assessments. Our role is to attract the companies that are going to make the private investment, and why would they choose us over our neighbors or our competitors? And it's usually driven by having the infrastructure in place. For example, in the Darigold project, which is the largest kind of project you could really be talking about at a $650 million private investment, they would not execute a purchase and sale agreement with the Port of Pasco without language in it that guaranteed that the port would deliver the necessary public infrastructure in order for them to establish operations. We currently, as the port, provide assistance to Connell whenever they request it, and would assist them in doing recruitment to those land sites when they're shovel ready, because it makes them easy to market.
Okay, and then on the port one there, two questions kind of on that probably can be answered together, I'm guessing, is will the 10 million requested, will that accomplish all of the pieces, or is that only a portion of it? And then with that, will the industrial zoning be maintained and it'll be a mixed-use industrial project, or will it rezone to mixed-use commercial and residential?
Let me take those into separate questions, if I may. I don't believe that this $10 million will fully fund 100% of the infrastructure necessary, but it will fund the key infrastructure that immediately makes that property marketable and certainly usable by the cruise lines. The rest of the work would be, perhaps that $10 million doesn't stretch to the entire 50 acres in terms of road, water, and sewer, but it would open a portion and allow us to begin to market that. We have had interest in that property since I've been here. We've shown it a number of times, and people really choose to step back because we're not in a position to be shovel ready at this time. This is a key investment for that. With regard to zoning, we would like to see at least a portion of that stay light industrial to support small manufacturing operations. And when we talk about small, Commissioner, those are facilities that are 25,000 square feet instead of 500,000 square feet, and a dozen jobs instead of 100 jobs. So niche or boutique, if you will, the kinds of things that can function adjacent to other types of uses.
So do you anticipate it having a residential component or a commercial component? So a full mixed use?
Yeah, the developers that we've spoken to that have chosen to walk because we're not ready are looking to do a full-scale mixed-use development. So again, like the notion of commercial retail on the main floor, multifamily residential on the second, third, and fourth, fifth floors. We also feel like redevelopment in the wharf is a way to really spur redevelopment in the adjacent residential areas and commercial areas that surround the wharf. Good
Yeah.
investment is always followed by better investment.
Yeah. I'll tell you the reason for my question, is that 10 million enough is, the thought in my head was the Vista Field project. And, so that was the reason for my question. Thank you so much.
Yep, absolutely understood.
Any further questions?
Not here.
All right.
Great. Did you want to have a conversation with Randy on the bonding side, or are your questions?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioners.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Boy, he was really pushing me, wasn't he? So just also wanted to mention that we are joined in the room by officials from the city of Pasco, Tridec, and Connell, as you saw there. And I always like to have this just little background of the 09 program, because I know a lot, especially members of the public, a new commissioner may not be aware that this is a 0.09% of the sales tax that's collected in the county that otherwise would go to the state and be kept by the state for their purposes. But in rural counties, it's allowed to come back to the county for these express purposes of economic development. So this is not an added tax, it's just getting a piece of what the state would collect back into our county, which is appreciated. So when we were putting together the discussion, the recommendation on bonding, we had heard that the county had a lot of concern over the risk of bonding, as well as the interest rates and the climate of bonding, and it's somewhat changed dramatically on interest rates since we first started that discussion. So we wanted to make sure we could come before you and provide a way, if we were going to recommend bonding, that would at least speak to those concerns so you could make your decision. So the analysis that Stephen was referring to that was done by Foster Garvey, and that's Bill Tonkin, who's our bond counsel, and I believe Foster Garvey is also the bond counsel that the county uses. We said, hey, we've got these funds. They're allowed to be collected for another 30 years. If we're talking about bonding for multiple agencies, how do we protect the county? Because they have these concerns, and frankly, I'd take the same position if I was in your shoes. This is a lot of money and a lot of risk. We previously have bonded the 09 funds, and we just finished paying those bonds, I believe, last year. So this is not new for the county. In that case, the county did assume all the risk. They assumed all the debt capacity of those bonds, and we didn't feel that was going to be appropriate for this request to you of bonding this time. So Foster Garvey came up with two options. The first was really mostly all on the county. It's like, you do the bonds, you take the risk, and we have an interlocal agreement that says if we don't collect enough funds of 09 tax collections to pay off those bonds, then agencies, you are responsible, but at the same time, it still affected your debt capacity, and probably you would still be tied into the risk of those bonds. So that wasn't a great option, but it was needed. The second option is an interlocal agreement that would state the county will dedicate a percentage or a specific dollar amount of the 09 funds to the agencies for these projects, and to do with as you will on however you want to finance those projects. So in that case, we would be getting the bonds ourselves. The county would not be getting the bonds. And the only tie we have to the county is that interlocal agreement that says we will provide a slice of the 09 funds to your agency. Foster Garvey's analysis, which you have in your packet, concluded that would insulate the county from going against your bonded debt capacity. So that does not affect what you can use your bonds for other projects that you may want to do down the road. And you would also not be tied to paying back those bonds if for some reason the 09 funds are not coming in at the level that we need to pay off our debt capacity. The one link that you would have is a reporting requirement, and we've had a couple conversations with your treasurer and deputy treasurer, and I saw at least Josie in the room here. Both are here, and I think it'd be appropriate for them to speak to that as well to get their analysis. But it seems like, to me, a pretty clear way to insulate the county from assuming the risk of our bonds if the 09 collections do not come in as expected. The second piece I'd like to talk about in your packet was a graph prepared by our finance director, Donna Watts, who is here with us as well. And what's on this chart, if you look at the two lines on top, that reflects potential projected revenue from the 09 fund over the remaining 30 years of the program as authorized by the legislature. So the top line is if revenue increases by 5% per year. The gray line is if revenue increases 3% per year. And just for historical background, there's a footnote on there. Our sales tax collections have actually been increasing by 11% per year. So it's even those are somewhat conservative, but you never know how sales tax collections are going to go. The blue and orange bar graphs that you have on the bottom, the blue is what we are recommending. The blue is what the annual debt capacity would be on the 3 bonded projects that we have, Stephen has presented to you. So the gap between the blue bar and the 2 lines is the additional sales tax collections we project would be collected every year in excess of what's needed to fund the agency bonds. The orange we put on there just to show that if there was an appetite for doing more bonding, the orange just uses current tax collections projected at a flat rate for the next 30 years. So there is potential for more bonding depending on if commission wants to do bonding, what your appetite would be for that. Is there any questions on that? But overall, this is a very conservative estimate of bonds. It's under what we're collecting now for 09 collections. It does not involve the county taking on the risk. So we feel like this is a viable opportunity for the county if you would like to pursue bonding. The other thing that's shown on this chart is the projected interest rate that's shown for bonds on here is 4.5%, which is not bad. You know, it's not the historic low that we saw a few years ago, but it's also come down from what it was even a couple of years ago. And that's an average of taxable projects and non-taxable projects. So if you had a non-taxable project, which you can use for public infrastructure, it's actually just under 3% is what our financial consultant is telling us. So interest rates are actually not bad. That's, I think, pretty good. So with that, I think that's all I had to say on the financial side.
All right, any questions?
No questions.
Questions?
So is it fair to say, you described 2 different paths, sort of. Is it fair to say that the first path that you described would be, so to speak, that the county would be co-signing for that bond, and the second one would be that the entity does a standalone without a co-signer? That's kind of a simple way
In a
of
nutshell.
describing
Yep.
it in a nutshell?
Yep,
Okay,
exactly.
thank you. That's all.
All right, but no further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item B, Resolution 2024-013, Code of Conduct, presented by Mike Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is something I've been working on with my predecessor, Dwayne Davidson. Commissioner Didier has also been helpful. My assistant, Jennifer Medelez, and former clerk of the board, Karen Milhelm, also was an integral part of this process. So this code of conduct that we present today is really a guide for decorum during public meetings here in the courthouse. I think it's an incredible opportunity with Commissioner Bauman jumping on board, and to make it clear, this is not Robert's Rules of Order, but what I consider a solid set of guidelines for decorum and how we conduct ourselves during these meetings. So with Commissioner Bauman jumping on board, really excited about the possibilities of cohesiveness, and we've got so much work for the county moving forward this year. So I think this is a really good way to tee off 2024.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, go ahead, John.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I just wanted to raise a little bit of a concern before the board has an opportunity to vote on that. One of the concerns raised, I believe, with our office, this was sent to our office for review. There is a concern that a lot of the language, while it might appear that appears agreeable, the question is, it seems to almost limit a commissioner's ability to raise concerns that they might validly have. The commissioner meeting is really the only opportunity an individual commissioner gets to participate with fellow commissioners. There is some language in the conduct that kind of limits the ability of a fellow commissioner to basically speak in a public meeting, and I think that's helpful at times. I know it might be uncomfortable, but one of the protections of our constitutional rights for free speech is that it doesn't protect comfortable speech, it protects the uncomfortable speech, and sometimes speech that might not be desired. I don't see this in any way trying to detract from that, but the concern is when you lay out kind of some restrictions like limiting a commissioner's ability to speak against the board, like if the board has taken action. This board has criticized action of other commissioners at times, and if you could keep that professional, that's obviously the preferred method, but sometimes those actions or criticisms members of this committee might feel are warranted. So there is a concern on that. Usually Robert's rules are adopted because it doesn't go into the subjective or the substantive speech or content of speech limitations. It basically is a procedural format. In other words, if someone is getting out of order or unruly, someone could call a point of order, and then the chair could be able to look at the Roberts rules and figure out, hey, is that a person's comment at a time or out of order, without going into the substantive content of the actual speech. So I just wanted to voice a little bit of concern or caution as the board weighs into these things. It sounds like this is great. You're asking folks to be professional, but then the question is, what authority does any member of this board have to limit the speech of another independently elected commissioner? You guys function as a board collectively, meaning there has to be a majority of two, but essentially the question really becomes, if someone isn't or chooses not to follow that, I guess ultimately the taxpayers, the citizens will make that decision at election time. Each one of us gets an opportunity for a job performance review, usually in the term of 4 years, sometimes earlier. If people deviate so much from their oath of office or duties, they can be recalled short of that term. I just want to share those concerns with you as you contemplate this. I think it attempts to achieve a good result, which is, hey, keep a professional decorum, create some kind of rules. Just something to think about, though, is, you know, what are ultimately, if someone does violate, what is the remedy, I guess, the expectation? And that's what I want the board to consider is there an unrealistic expectation? You're not going to be able to suppress the comments from any particular commissioner. They're going to be able to speak at a commissioner meeting if they are elected or selected, in this case, commissioner. They are an equal body, and this body is the executive and legislative branch for the county. And so each of you have to have that individual right, and I don't think it would be wise to have a policy that would almost suggest that a majority of the board could suppress the minority. In other words, if you have a person that wants to raise objections, they should be able to raise those objections and be able to state their reasoning on the record as part of this board's meeting. So I just want to make sure there's a reasonable expectation there with adopting such rules. There's a lot of things that I'd have some concern about because it really goes into almost controlling some of the substantive content of speech that could be raised from a commissioner. Again, we don't have to deal with these things when everybody functions accordingly and professional at times, but that's the question. Who gets to determine what's considered professional? Some people would say that professional means that they're advocating for their position, and they're advocating in a way that is going to ensure that the constituents' concerns are raised to this board, as well as the concerns that they may have as an independent elected county commissioner. So I just want to make sure the board is aware of that when you adopt this, what it really entails, whether or not there's really any enforcement mechanism. It's great to adopt Robert's rules. I think most bodies, elected bodies, that has always been our recommendation, is adopt Robert's rules because it really goes to a procedural process without diving into the actual content of any particular person's speech. So I'll just close with that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Sand, I would like to ask, where in here where do you feel that it restricts a member's ability to speak? I can't find it.
Well, looking at, if I go back to, there's like limits on an ability to speak, like to whether or not they can speak a second time before everyone has an opportunity to speak. And I guess the other concern is what's considered interruption, what's considered, it also says during work study sessions or committee meetings. And to my knowledge, I don't think the board has had a workshop session. And so there's some kind of concerns that if a commissioner felt that because there hasn't been a workshop or study, this is really the only forum that they would have to be able to speak or address an issue. There's also limitations where it does say, let me get to the section, members may address presenters directly. Once recognized by the chair, questions for presenters or staff may not become lengthy exchanges. Who gets to determine what's so
What
lengthy?
section was that?
Oh, I'm just reading number 7, going down the list. I could go down one by one, I guess, and raise concerns.
Well, Mr. Sand, I got to ask you,
Yeah.
you stated that we should be following Robert Rules of Order. Robert Rules of Order states that every member should have the opportunity to speak before the member speaks a second time. That's one of the Robert Rules of Orders.
I get that.
Okay, so I don't see the limitation of speech here. I don't see it hurting anybody's ability to get their message out.
So if we look at 7 and 8, just to give you an idea of kind of the subjective nature. So 7 talks about questions for presenters or staff may not become lengthy exchanges. What if one of the members of this body has some legitimate issues or concern that are not resolved in 2 minutes? Who gets to decide what is considered a lengthy exchange?
The chairman.
Well, and that's the question. So if one of the members of your board thinks that, hey, I've got a lot of calls from constituents on a particular issue, chairman decides that, hey, 30 seconds is determined to be a reasonable length of time, but maybe that individual commissioner says, you know what, this needs a much more lengthier conversation. 15 minutes, 20 minutes might be appropriate. That's the reasonable question out there, is because according to this, if what you're saying is the chairman now gets to decide those kind of factors where it's really undefined, the real question is, what do the individual members of the board get to do? Looking at 8, discussions should be focused on the issues at hand and remarks must be relevant. Who gets to determine relevancy? Members may not paraphrase other members. Sometimes paraphrasing is important because I know there's been discussions with this board where a member has been said to have said something, and that member wants to clarify, and there's a discussion there to ensure that everybody understands the position of members before taking action or decision. So I just want the board to make sure that they're adopting something that is flexible. This works great if everything's fine and dandy, but what happens about a time when someone is really passionate? What happens if it concerns an issue with either you, Chairman Didier, or Commissioner Didier, or Rocky? What happens when you have a particular body of your constituents from your district or county at large that have come to you and they've given you maybe more information than your fellow commissioners? This is your one opportunity to present in front of the group and share those concerns with your fellow commissioners. And I'd be afraid that with these kind of rules, the person that might not be in that similar situation, they could determine, hey, I don't need to hear that. You've taken 2 minutes, that's fine, 3 minutes or whatever. And your fellow commissioner wants to be able to address and share those comments. So that, I'm just sharing that this kind of rules, when we get into kind of the substantive restrictions, that does present a problem. It may not be a foreseeable problem right now, but that's the problem too. just like in this state, we give authority to a governor, for emergency powers. Nobody thought about it. It was almost 99%. People said, hey, that's a good thing in 2019. And then we know what happens in 2020. People realize that, hey, once we adopted such rules, adopted a statute, it gets interpreted or executed in a way that maybe majority or a large group of people do not like. That's the caution I'm sharing with this group, because what appears to be a problem today might not be the issue, but be considerate of when you adopt something like this, what happens when now all of a sudden your individual free speech might be viewed as limited, because now your fellow commissioners are going to resort to this and say, hey, we have adopted this rules. The chair has been given authority to determine what's reasonable, what's a reasonable time or substantive. And I think with Commissioner Bauman being brought to it, I don't know that he's had an adequate time to review the details of this. It would be important to have him with an opportunity to be able to look these over, be able to weigh in with any concerns before the board adopts it. That's all I'm sharing. Again, I'm just giving you some guidance advice, because if the board tried to take action to suppress the speech of one of your fellow board members, then I could see a constitutional challenge that they're going to advocate that their constitutional rights were suppressed. And that's the thing. First Amendment right doesn't protect the polite speech or professional speech, as some might call it. It's to protect the, perhaps some people might even say, the unruly speech at times. That's why when we have statutes for disorderly conduct, we can't arrest people for engaging in protest and discourse. We can arrest for actions if they're blocking traffic or doing other actions that infringe upon the rights of others. So again, I just share that snapshot for you for consideration. I think these things they all look good right now, but what happens when there is an issue that is really concerning to either you or your constituents that raise concerns to you? And each of you as individual members of this board should be allowed to have flexibility to be able to share or discuss. And if that means you need 30 minutes time to make sure that your viewpoint is heard, I think that should be something that the board should consider. So,
I have one quick question. Following Robert's Rules of Order, if we were to adopt that, wouldn't we have to hire a parliamentarian to make sure that we were in compliance with Robert's Rules of Order? It's been my understanding that we've always used Robert's Rules of Order as a guideline because we could have serious consequences if we didn't follow Robert's Rules of Order precisely. And that's been the recommendation from one of the top experts.
if you adopt something and you don't follow it, I guess there's a question too, is just like this, you've created a lot more rules that haven't been tried and tested throughout this state or other jurisdictions. And so by adding a lot new restrictive language that kind of goes into substance, there's a greater concern, I think, for risk of adopting a much more broader rules than trying to focus on Robert's rules. You're right. There's going to be, the chairman is granted a certain level to determine hearing the point of order, allowing the member to raise the issues or concerns with that point of order. Ultimately, someone gets to decide, and I guess a motion could be made by any particular individual member that feels that their speech was quelched in a way, or that the chairman acted out of order, could ask for a vote or bring a motion to address the particular issue. So there's always going to be a level of somebody's going to have to make a determination, and hopefully with guidance, if it's limited to Robert rules, that's usually a procedural issue. And it's not going to dive into, hey, I didn't like the content of what this commissioner was saying because he was kind of berating me or disparaging me on the record. Again, that's not necessarily the issue that you're likely going to have, but that could be an issue that comes up. And so Robert's rules are really designed to help the procedure of the flow of a meeting kind of generally keep the decorum, but it doesn't dive into a lot of the issues or content related. So
I've been told that there are people out there that watch meetings that have adopted Robert's Rules of Order to create their own lawsuits against the entity.
Well, I guess if you don't follow any rules, then are you suggesting that
Well,
not following
I
any
know
rules
Robert's
would be
Rules
better?
of Order, is a book 3 inches thick. That's why I'm asking, is because it's always been the recommendation that use them as a guideline, but don't adopt them. But
Mr. Chair, can I?
yes, Chair recognizes Commissioner Bauman.
So on page 3, Mr. Sant, bullet point 4, it says, any member of the body may rise to a point of order if they feel this section is being violated. The chair can rule to uphold or decline the point of order, and the body by majority vote may override the chair. The concern that you raised, does that not negate that concern?
In theory, yes, because that's essentially what Robert's Rules would adopt, is the idea that if any person that is acting as chair feels that they have exceeded, they don't have unlimited authority. The chair only has the authority that the majority of a body grants to that person. And so for this, what I'm saying is the very nature of the authority that you've granted is that if you adopt some rules, and this includes a much broader, extensive set of rules than just Robert's Rules, this is going into certain content of speech. And if you follow the law as you would adopt this, so to speak, by adopting this as a resolution, it basically now becomes your essential law or rules that you're going to follow. If you then feel that, wait a minute, that rule that we've all adopted, let's say you adopt this today, you're going to now, as a majority, say, well, wait a minute, it appears that you're violating this rule. Well, what if that person says, yeah, but the rule itself is flawed because it overreaches into my constitutionally protected speech? That's the issue. If you have Robert's Rules, it's basically just a procedural issue. It doesn't dive into the substance. It doesn't dive into whether or not what's deemed reasonable for a certain member of this board to be able to speak. You might have a need to speak 5-10 minutes. Is it the chair then? Are you granting, by adopting this, are you granting that chair then the unfettered authority to determine whether or not 5 minutes or 10 minutes is reasonable or not?
No, but I think that then a point of order could be made by the interrupted, the one that was speaking, and that he needs longer to speak. The chair says no, and you can appeal it to the board, and then it's a majority decision to whether to allow that to continue. It appears to me. I recognize that I appreciate what the chair said about adopting the rules of order. We would then need a parliamentarian to make sure that we followed the exact letter. Where this appears to me to be a general guideline and kind of the guardrail, so to speak, that there is then opportunity for us to check each other and the chair.
So again, and I urge the board to kind of look at this with some caution. If you're adopting this broad set of rules, what you have just said is that you're going to defer to the majority of the board then to weigh in on what is subjectively interpreted as a reasonable amount of time for another particular member. Let's say 2 members of this 3-member board don't really like the comments from another member of the board. They could basically choose by majority is that, hey, this person's out of order. We don't want to hear what that person has to say. Carry on.
So what is the position of a chair? Why have a chair then?
Well, the chair typically is a position that ensures that there is a smooth operation and decorum within a meeting. And that's typically what Robert's Rules attempt to achieve by having guidelines where each of the members gets to speak. Before a vote, there's a process that if, hey, something's out of line, if someone wants to make a point of order, the chair could then pause the action, hear the point of order before a vote or at any point in time, hear that. And yes, there does have to be decisions that are made by the chair. And there's no system that is going to be perfect, but what I'm urging the board to do is use caution before adopting something that, while on its face now, might look like, hey, there's no problems. But what happens when one of you has a minority opinion? That is different from the other two. Are you seceding your right to be able to carry on a more lengthy conversation? I mean, and defer to someone that might be of an opposing viewpoint? I mean, believe it or not, there's been opposing viewpoints shared by this board. And so the question becomes, do you want to adopt rules that might on its face look good now, but then when there is an issue, that's when you're going to have a problem. And if the board decides to adopt these rules today, maybe it works fine. It might work for a period of time, but there's going to be a time that these are going to be challenged because somebody is going to feel that the other two members of the board are quelching their ability to speak freely and raise issues of genuine concern, at least to that individual member who was elected. So that's my only caution.
Thank you.
There's not a perfect system. Robert's rules, whether you say that, you've listed and you've highlighted Robert's rules here, so it assumes that those rules would be followed. So I don't know that there's any risk to saying, hey, we're adopting Robert's rules or we've put these as general guidelines. I think it's implied that everybody's going to attempt to follow the rules the best they can. They're not expecting all three of you to be parliamentarians and experts on that, but generally speaking, Robert's rules don't go into the extent of limitations that could be viewed as limitations of free speech. So,
No further questions, Chair.
Again,
Thank you.
just a word of caution, consideration. That's all I wanted to raise. Thank you.
No, thank you. So I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass Resolution 2024-013, Code of Conduct.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion?
I'd just like to say that I think that this has the ability for, if a chairman is unruly, that the two other members can overrule him. It observes the point of order. It recognizes Robert's Rules of Order as a guideline, but we're not adhering to them. And we had quite a crew of people that have helped put this together, and one of them was Mr. Davidson, which I think did an incredible job of putting this. He was the one that we started on this when he was the intern, and I think this is well done, and I don't foresee a problem.
I think with anything that we could put together, that it would have room for improvement in everything that we do. However, I believe this is a good general guideline, and respect is necessary amongst us, but I believe it's a good guideline, and I would encourage us to pass it. Thank you.
All right, all in favor of approving Resolution 2024-013, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to Resolution 2024-014, Fire District Number 2, ARPA funding, presented by Shirley Jones.
Morning.
Good morning.
Seeking approval of an award of the ARPA funds in the amount of $963,615 to Fire District Number 2 for the building of Phase 1 of Fire Station. They initially have architecture built for a 6-bay, and what they're doing is they're just going to do, because that's $2.3 million, they're looking for additional funding on top of ARPA to cover the 3 additional bays. So this one is strictly for 3 bays. Later on, an office will be added and 3 other bays if they could get the funding. They currently have 13 vehicles, and only 4 of those during the winter can actually have water in them and be stored in their fire station. The rest of them, what happens is they have to empty the pumps and the pipes, because otherwise they're outside of the fire station and they'll freeze up. So during a major fire, they would have to bring, use the current vehicles they do have warmed up, which is just 4. They would need to bring in the others from wherever they're located, let them warm up, fill them up before they could use those for any fires or accidents or anything that they may need. So definitely needed. Again, this is just for 3 bays, which will house 6 vehicles total.
What will they do with the existing fire station that they have?
At this point in time, they're not sure. Again, part of it will depend also because at least it is another building that they can put some vehicles in it when they have the additional fire station. Mm-hmm. So it does give them a little bit more expansion on storage. However, depending upon if they can, get the other funding from whether it be a levy or the state, to add the other 3 bays, that then would house 12. So they would be pretty well set once they can get all of those built.
Yeah, I've seen the facilities. They are in need of
Yeah.
newer.
It may be something, if they do get all of this, the 6 bays, that perhaps they could sell that property, that building. But at this point in time, it's still going to be needed.
All right. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
on that old building, has there been any discussion on a possible ambulance building? Because that was part of the deal with this, is that they're going to be looking at formulating their own ambulance district. Because right now, Hospital District 1 satisfies their needs, and the taxpayers in Hospital District 1 are funding their needs for ambulance.
When I spoke with one of the commissioners regarding that for the fire district, and he said they certainly could house an ambulance as long as they had the people certified to actually run the ambulance service. Sounds like there might be something else that's a possibility as well. Again, I haven't had updates for that.
Do they have an ambulance in that district?
Not at this point. They don't have any personnel that are certified to be EMTs
Or the ambulance itself?
for the ambulance, right?
No. My question is, do they have an ambulance?
Not at this point, no.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Hospital District 1, through our 1.5 million, they are purchasing new ambulances, and they're willing to donate one of those ambulances to District 2.
Okay,
But they got to have a
Staffing.
certified team.
sure.
Couple of questions for you. So this new building will house 6 vehicles. And so my question is, the old facility is housing 4, so that means we have 9 machines sitting outside. This building will take 6. Does that mean we then have only 3 vehicles that are sitting outside?
Right.
So we will continue to use the old station until some further time?
Yes,
Okay, so that will take us from 9 trucks sitting in the weather down to 3.
right.
Okay, and then couple other questions. Would you confirm the request number, the request value?
963,615.
Okay, and then my last question, it says the deadline to obligate all funds is December 31st, 2024. This will meet that deadline?
It will. This really, in effect, as far as obligating the funds, is on our part, but also the architecture of the building has already been completed. They're using the architecture firm as far as it would be similar to DES for us with the HVAC system. And they then contract out with other people as far as the building and such. Surveys have already been done. This amount actually includes the architectural fees, which are approximately $162,000. It also includes about $768,000 for the building. And then it was approximately, the remaining was for the surveys, about $6,000.
Thank you. So is it fair to say that by December 31st, not that it can't be done sooner, but the building and the facility will be complete and the funds will be expended?
No, just the obligation. The obligation needs to be completed by the end of 2024. The building itself would need to be completed by December of 2026.
Got it. Thank you. No further questions, Chair.
Well, there's definitely a need there. I mean, and the people that go out to Palouse Falls, I don't
Yeah.
think the majority of them realize how dangerous of a position they've put themselves in by not following the posted signs at Palouse Falls and the distance it is for help to get to them. So,
Well, and my understanding on that is if someone does fall, it takes numerous fire stations to go out to deal with it, because it takes at least 7 firemen to be able to set up anything to reach to the bottom of Palouse Falls to then be able to bring them up as well. So
I
it's,
believe they're relying on Walla Walla County for their climbing.
Technical rescue team.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to be able to rope and climb down those, I don't believe there's anyone in Franklin County that has that capability, so that's why they rely on Walla Walla County for their assistance.
I see.
Could I ask another question?
Yes, the chair recognizes Commissioner Bauman.
So, at the bottom of the front page of this ASR, it said, "The fire station will ensure the fire district can prevent, mitigate, and treat COVID-19, as well as provide emergency response." Is there something outside of housing vehicles and something further that this facility is going to do? That's a little bit unique, that it can prevent, mitigate, and treat COVID-19.
Well, in response to any type of accidents or anything along the lines of COVID-19, there was protocol that needed to be followed regarding personnel dealing with people because of the possibility of COVID. But they're a first responder, and so in effect, they will be handling anything dealing with, whether it be accidents, car accidents, collisions, fires, anything to where anyone can be, infected with COVID-19.
Okay, was that language required by the receiving this money, or is this just something that we put in there?
This is wording that is used within the federal grant because ARPA dealt with COVID-19. That was the reason for the funding, and that's why the verbiage along that lines.
Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I think I'll let the new commissioner make the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept Resolution 2024-014 as presented.
I second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you,
Thank you.
Shirley. All right, moving on. Resolution 2024-015, creation of Franklin County Commissioners VIBA voting group, presented by Mike Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an agenda item that we're revisiting from 2023. This is the creation of a separate 3-member VIBA voting group. This group would completely separate yourselves, being the commissioners, from the current elected official body VIBA group. So the intent of creating this commissioner VIBA group is so commissioners won't have the option to convert that VIBA benefit to cash. That part of the equation is not addressed in today's resolution, so ultimately we'll have to come back and vote on that part of it once this separate VIBA group is created. So again, today's resolution will establish the 3-member voting block amongst the 3 commissioners. Jeff Briggs from the PA's office has helped me put together the language. So Jeff is here in case you have any questions. But essentially, this will separate you from the current elected official voter block, which are able to convert the VIBA benefit to cash. And essentially, you'll have to make that vote in the future, but this resolution establishes the separation piece.
All right, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is the first step. The
Right.
next step will, and Mr. Briggs will tell us, the next step will be for us to make that oath, I guess, that we will never take the health care benefits and salary again. Is that what the next step will be on the next meeting, Mr. Briggs?
Well, looking at this right now, and good morning, Commissioners. Chair.
Good morning.
It does look like this particular resolution, and this is why my office it sort of had a cautionary, opinion on this, which is because it's indicating that any excess contributions would not be contributed to VIBA. So this would essentially eliminate the commissioner's VIBA contributions. And in doing so, it sort of raises, the issues that we had discussed previously. It's been, numerous discussions and meetings. I think I'd referenced that in my ASR, that we had discussed this back in November of 2023, but essentially the issue is if the excess contributions are considered salary, which is still up in the air, right? It hasn't been decided yet by the Attorney General's office. Well, then we're lowering the salary of an elected official during that term, which there's a constitutional prohibition on that. I can't remember the exact article off the top of my head, but there's a prohibition on an elected official lowering another elected official's salary, even their own, during their term. And the commissioners are kind of uniquely positioned because they're restricted from both increasing and decreasing their own salaries during their term. They can increase another elected official's salary, say the auditor, whoever, during their term, but they can't increase their own. But in no case can an elected official decrease their own salary. And so this issue had initially been brought up, I think, by the auditor who had presented this and raised this issue. My office has looked at it, and we have passed that on to the Attorney General. And I don't know that we have any sort of timeline in terms of when that decision might come back from the Attorney General's office. But that, of course, is our concern, is that if this is in fact salary, then potentially we're doing something that the Constitution will prohibit us from doing.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, permission.
So, Mr. Briggs, if I understand you right, we're concerned that this may be ruled salary. And if it is, then we can't decrease our salary when it's declared a benefit.
Right. Salary, taxable fringe benefit, however you want to phrase it. If you're taxed on it, I think that's sort of the crucial distinction here. And I'm certainly not a tax expert, but it does appear that if you're able to take a cash benefit in lieu of VEBA, then potentially you're talking about a cafeteria plan, which is not an HRA VEBA, because the IRS tax protections of an HRA VEBA plan restrict you from having the option to obtain a cash benefit in lieu of VEBA. So that's okay.
My second question is, I believe the three commissioners sitting before you are all going to take the health care package, and therefore, if it covers their family and if there's anything left over, it goes into VEBA for them, and we are declining that also. We just want the coverage for our family. Mm-hmm. Would that be, I guess we're waiting for the AG's decision on whether that's salary or not.
Right. I don't think the scenario that you presented would be salary. The issue that we're kind of dealing with is whether, hypothetically, of course, two wrongs can make a right here. I don't know that they could, because what the problem arose earlier, right, when the VEBA was voted to be converted into cash, right? That was the initial issue. Assuming that was constitutionally improper, can we now change that? Well, the Constitution also says you can't reduce your salary. So now we're trying to correct it with another potential thing that the Constitution says you can't do. So that's a concern. But in terms of your scenario of can the commissioners increase their own health insurance benefits for their families, they can do that midterm. That's not a problem at all, because that is not considered compensation. There's old Attorney General opinions that might suggest otherwise, but the legislature actually stepped in and has just flat out said that insurance benefits are not compensation within the meaning of the Constitution. Whether or not the legislature can do that or not, I guess, is up in the air, but they did it, and it's certainly not my role is not to question the legality of a statute, and neither is it the Attorney General's role as well. So I don't think they would, call into question that statute. But again, I guess I'm taking a long way around the block of saying that it's perfectly fine to increase your health insurance benefits midterm for your families.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
May I? So a question for you. So, two side-by-side questions. So, are we taxed on the benefits we receive, the health insurance benefit? Are we taxed on those benefits?
No,
We are not. So,
no.
the scenario that we have before us is talking about taking something that we are not taxed on, which in this scenario is not considered income,
Right.
versus the other scenario. So when somebody takes their VEBA as a cash benefit, they are in fact taxed on that. Is that correct?
That's correct. So an HRA VEBA, again, is not taxed. It's a 501c9 trust. But if you're allowing individuals to opt for a cash benefit, that would violate the 501c9 rules and arguably make it something else, a cafeteria plan, which is taxable.
I understand that, but the resolution before us today is the benefit that we take is saying that we are not going to take anything beyond the health benefit that we receive non-taxed, which is not considered income. It is considered a benefit, as we have it addressed in front of us today.
Right.
And saying we are not going to take anything beyond what our specific needs are.
Right.
Am I correct in that?
You are, but again, the issue arose before this meeting. I think that's perfectly fine. This would be a perfectly fine, and maybe the best way to do it would be to stagger the implementation, because if you pass it now, that's fine, but just having it not take effect until the beginning of each commissioner's next term. Because again, the issue is, it's that last whereas clause in the resolution. Whereas the employer wishes to establish an HRA VEBA group and corresponding policy for its board of county commissioners, and to eliminate VEBA contributions to the group. So that's the problem, is we're saying eliminate VEBA contributions to the group, but if the board previously allowed conversion of VEBA benefits to cash, we're really talking about eliminating cash benefits, which could be a wage, and that's where the sort of constitutional conundrum comes into play.
I appreciate that, but that's not the resolution in front of us. The resolution in front of us is for a non-taxed benefit, not for a salary, a taxed salary.
Right. Well, and I mean, following this, it would be the case that the board wouldn't have any HRA VEBA benefits. So that would be perfectly permissible, but again, the question is, does that then mean that the board would no longer take a cash conversion, which again, if it's considered a wage, there's a prohibition on that restriction.
I
Sorry,
understand
I keep
that.
talking
I
circles with you
understand
on
that.
it, but-
It's a complicated, I've been watching this discussion for a while, so I'm excited that I get to ask some of these questions.
Right.
So a different question, if this action were to take place today, there would be a new 3-member VEBA group. Does that positively or negatively impact the previous group that this board would have been a part of?
I don't know that it would necessarily have it, because that other board, or sorry, that other group would certainly still they would still exist, and they would still be able to, have their benefits set up as they are. So I don't think it would negatively impact any group at all.
And would this board have any further influence over or authority over that VEBA group that this board would then be leaving by this action?
Authority, yes, because the board sets the benefits for each group. So yes, they would have authority. But any actions, of course, they take with respect to this new group would not affect any other group.
Thank you.
I would also add that Mr. Gonzalez and I have run this by, and I think we spoke about this at other meetings, and I'm sure it sounds like you've watched those, but we did run this by the VEBA plan administrator, and certainly from their perspective, they're not looking at the constitutional issues that I'm concerned about, but certainly from the perspective that they're looking at it, which is simply whether or not this would still be a 501c9 if we took this action, they're completely on board with that, and I think it's perfectly fine from their standpoint.
So they would be fine with this board leaving the existing group?
Correct.
All right, any further questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass Resolution 2024-015, creation of Franklin County Commissioner VEBA Voting Group.
I'll second that motion.
All right, discussion?
I have no discussion.
Hearing
discussion.
Hearing none, I will ask for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item E, Citizen Advisory Committee on County Road Standardization and Efficiency Review, presented by Mike Gonzalez, Franklin County Administrator.
Thank you, Chair. So this agenda item is the discussion of the creation of a county-wide code committee, to kind of simplify it. So the intent of bringing this forward is to create the group. There isn't a resolution associated with it at this point, Chair. So what I really wanted to do, and Commissioner Didier and I have been talking about this for probably a little part of a month, and some citizens have approached him about this idea, and I have talked to Derek Bratton about the creation of this group, which he's on board, our planning manager. So what I'm hoping that comes out of today is really guidance for the future resolution that I'll work with Jeff on in the PA's office. I think some of the things we have to think about with this code committee is how many members we'd like to have, where in the county they should come from, what sort of expertise they should have. So, and ultimately, the result of the formation of this code committee is giving the public an opportunity to weigh in. Our current codes that we have in the county, can we clean them up? Can we make things better? And I'm always an advocate for giving the community a voice. I think the other thing we'll have to think about is, do we have one particular commissioner that's sort of a chair of this group, and then have other commissioners toggle in and talk to the code committee. I love it because I think it gives transparency. Again, Derek's on board. He said he'll help out as much as we need him to, and I think he's somebody that likes to interface with the public too. So they're going through that process now, but I think this sharpens up the process. So with that being said, I'll toss it back to you, Chair, for any discussions you guys may have.
Any idea of how often this committee would meet?
I believe a minimum monthly, I think, to start things off, maybe a couple of times. And I'm looking back to my time at the city of Pasco. I had established what I called a business advisory council that Commissioner Bauman was a part of. And so we wound up at the beginning, met a couple of times a month. And with these type of groups, you usually get individuals that are pretty engaged anyway. So you get the folks that, we might typically think are a pain, but, but they're also outspoken and they typically have expertise. So I felt that was really the effectiveness of the Pasco Business Advisory Council, because you get people who are stakeholders, you get people who love the process and are experts. So I think minimum once a month. I think the start of it, you do a couple of times a month, kind of establish the intent, and then you let people give their ideas of what they ultimately think it should be. And I really think it'll form itself organically. And then as you really look at the different codes, because there'll be certain codes I'm almost certain that'll stick out right off the bat, like, we need to fix this. And that's something that came out of the Business Advisory Council at Pasco, was there were certain codes that were in place where business owners were like, these just simply aren't working anymore, and we have to fix them. So we fixed them, and it was another engagement piece, and ultimately the effectiveness of the group was the body, because we were working hand in hand as city members and as community members, and I think we could do the same thing here. So I'm excited about it.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I didn't realize that Commissioner Bauman was part of that group, and I would think that if a commissioner was to be part of this group, it should be Commissioner Bauman, because he's got experience. And I believe that maybe 5 per person, I don't know how many members Commissioner Bauman were part of Pasco's.
I think that, towards the end of that, I think that was around 25.
It grew exponentially because it started out with maybe a group of 10 of us, and then more as it became more effective and people heard about it, more people wanted to be on board. And I think that was truly the effectiveness because it had an organic nature to it. And, you know, iron sharpens iron, as they say. So you had a group of individuals that were all stakeholders. And honestly, what I loved about that group, Commissioner Bauman, is we had friends, enemies, frenemies, all working together for the betterment of the city of Pasco. So, you know, hopefully we don't have any contention on this group, but I again,
Trying to figure out, was I one of the ones that was a pain?
No, you were, you were one of our reasonable people.
The only reason I showed up is that Mike bought pizza every week.
That's true.
Or every meeting, so.
It got better as we went along too.
I don't think that's why you showed up. So I'm just curious, do we stay with a 5-member board, but we encourage participation from the public?
I think so. I think we gauge kind of what the interest is, because my suspicion is it'll be organic and people are going to want to be a part of it. So whether you have an actual board, sometimes that becomes bureaucratic. And we didn't have an official board because the Pasco Advisory Council was really just an organic body. It wasn't an official recognized body of the city of Pasco, which was interesting, but it was very organic in nature. So we had people that would just show up. I mean, I think our largest group was probably 40 people.
Wow.
And I mean, we had some really good discussions. So I think if you create a board per se, it kind of gives an exclusionary feel to it. So I think initially, Commissioner Didier, is we see who shows up. We say, this is the first date. Who wants to be a part of this? And then I think we can establish who shows up and ultimately how we want that structured, because I'd hate to have the appearance that it's this bureaucratic body that we created as just another layer of bureaucracy.
I agree.
Because
And I think
I
that-
do hate bureaucracy.
I think they're going to have to realize that initially it's going to be you're going to have to delegate yourself to at least 20-hour commitment to go through that code, because it's pretty lengthy.
Right.
And you're going to have to read through it, and some of it is outdated, just like we've heard from Derek, that it needs to be revisited. So this would be a perfect opportunity to get it done.
Absolutely, and I think it's a good opportunity for the planning department to work with the public, and I'm excited, Commissioner Bauman, with his development background, because that's something, working with Steve over the years, and he's an expert at that, and he was really helpful when I was at the city of Pasco, because I was in that economic development space, and I started to work with the developers, and he'll have the expertise and the respect from the public. So if Commissioner Bauman is on board with that, that would be excellent.
Yes.
I would love to to help facilitate that. One thing that I'll share with you, commissioners, is that as Mike, in his role there in Pasco, kind of stood up that Business Advisory Council, like he described, it was an organic coming together, and it really was the people that cared and could. They had, it wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon, and people came understanding that, and came and worked, and as that grew, BF-COG was involved in that. I think TRIDEC began to show up, and it really was the stakeholders in our community that wanted to be involved really began to show up. Catholic Charities came and gave us a presentation on the facility they have there on 20th and Lewis, and gave us a kind of a complete look at what it was going to be before we got there, and that was something that the different business owners in downtown and people that were leadership in our community showed up and wanted to understand what was going on, and I really appreciated that. I think that it's going to take a little bit for it to get stood up. One thing I think that we may consider doing is kind of put together what the criteria is going to be by which we measure, the codes and the stuff that we're going to address, the standards that, what would we like to see? I'm a proponent of, lay out your expectation of what you want the results to be. And I would love to help with that, and excited to be able to have this opportunity to do that.
Well, one other thing I'd like to add is that this group of people, and you leading it, Mr. Bauman, would be that maybe we readdress the whole premise that this Growth Management Act that we're participating in, that I've been pretty hard on because it has given the bureaucrats over on the west side the ability to tell us how we're going to grow, where we're going to grow, and they actually don't leave that up to the community members. And maybe we need to look into the Growth Management Act and how it's affecting our county, and do we want to keep participating in it and being a member of it? Because there are some counties that have removed themselves.
I would certainly like to know the answer of, is there that opportunity to,
Yes.
what is the criteria surrounding our membership in the GMA, the Growth Management Act, and how do we, it appears to me that is somewhat taking away local control, and I would like to understand that better.
And I think it'd be good for our legal, maybe Mr. Briggs, to attend the meetings to make sure that we were staying in compliance and not getting ourselves into some hot water.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can attend those. And if I may, Commissioner, just briefly, one of the issues you'd run into, because we're required to plan under the GMA, would be certain grant funding from the state. And there's a list I have somewhere I could recite. I don't know off the top of my head. Certainly Public Works would know really well what some of those grants are. But it restricts grants, and then it also, when we apply for certain grants, we get less points in terms of qualifying for it. So that's really how the state,
Controls us?
They penalize you, yes.
God, don't put words in your mouth.
well, we can talk about it more. But
And yeah, and we're going through that a little bit right now because the AG's office reached out to us about a compliance issue. And as Jeff mentioned, the GMA is tied a lot to population, but it's kind of like the carrot and the stick, or whatever you want to call it. And that's how they penalize us. If you don't want to participate, you're not going to get certain infrastructure funding, roads. So it's almost it's a quid pro quo, really, with compliance. And with the intent with the Growth Management Act is really to develop within those boundaries, so you don't expand into farmland and other of those type of things. But I think the inadvertent effect is, as we all know, land has become so much more expensive. So when you develop inside this pocket, the thing that always miffs me is DNR has thousands of acres in Pasco and the surrounding areas that, if you really wanted to make development more affordable, why don't you hand over some of the land to developers at a really reasonable price so we can start from go? But so that's something I haven't been able to lobby efficiently yet. So it's one thing I keep bringing up to our legislators in our region. Get them to hand over some of that DNR land so developers can develop affordably. So just my soapbox.
All right. Well, thank you for that presentation. It sounds like we do have consensus that Commissioner Bauman will head up the Citizen Advisory Committee, and thank you for doing so. And unless there's any objection to that.
Nope.
All right, sounds good. All right, moving on to Commissioner Administrator updates, Mr. Gonzalez.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, congratulations, Chair Mullen. Excited to have you in that position, and congratulations to Commissioner Bauman once again. Been spending a lot of time with Commissioner Bauman, spent a lot of time with Chair Mullen yesterday, just really working closely. So, Commissioner, I'll just have to get with you kind of, the agenda chair meeting that we've established with Commissioner Didier. So really want to keep the conversation going, and I think we've established much better communication over this year. So it's really been a good year to work with all of you, and again, just to work with Steve and Commissioner Bauman now is going to be just excellent. Personally, for our department heads, really just been establishing goals and looking forward to 2024. We've got a lot of big ticket items that we're working on the consort study, just to tee everyone up. Clark Worth, who we've been working with, will present to this body. I believe it's the 30th or 31st, depending what that Wednesday hits on. So he'll basically have his financial analysis of the county. And, from that, really the next step, phase 2, is really long-term planning and strategizing. So that's something I know Commissioner Bauman really wants to do. So he'll give us and he's shared a lot of that information with us already. So I won't tell the folks what that entails. But if anybody in the public wants to see any of that, I can certainly share it with them. And then really looking at a CIP plan, what we do over this year, and how we become fiscally sound. We're establishing a VEBA committee to look at some of those issues, working with the unions. So there's just so much on the plate in 2024. So we've got a lot of work ahead. That's all I've got.
All right, thank you. And Commissioner Bauman, I know this is your first meeting, but you're more than welcome to give any of your ideas or what you've been considering working on. Just want to say welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair and Commissioners, for this opportunity. I feel like I've been training for this role for a while. And as you know, I have not made that a secret, and I've been working hard and excited to have this opportunity to make our community proud of my commitment to it and my willingness to work and be a good neighbor. So kind of give you what I've been doing. Last Thursday, of course, was the commissioners' meeting, and when you appointed me to this position, and so started the onboarding process that afternoon of what is expected of me, what is needed. That continued into Friday, and then had the opportunity to provide lunch for the administrator and his staff, as well as the HR staff, and have lunch with them and just visit with them, try to get to know them. There's a lot of staff here, and I've got a lot of learning to do. A lot of people to remember their names and get to know them. I also on last week began to meet with department heads, different electeds, hearing their concerns, understanding what their roles are here. This week I've been starting early and doing lots and lots of reading, from trying to prepare for this meeting, and with that, with the conversations that have happened of the recent past, I've been working hard and studying our travel policy. I was thankful on Monday, had the opportunity to go to the department head meeting and meet the different department heads here. And our public works director, county engineer, provided me with our snow plowing policy and our road striping policy after, Chair, your concern of some of the faded road striping, so that he was trying to help me understand and learn kind of what we do and what that looks like. So I was really thankful that he did that. And then really this week working closely with our administrator and the staff there to learn what is expected of me and how to work well and communicate with them. And got a phone and got an email account and have begun to communicate with people and on their concerns. And so excited to continue. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, it sounds like you've hit the road running, so thank you. Commissioner Didier.
Last week, light week, and I got to say that we need to get the assignments done for our meetings. It's not on the agenda, but I think if we continue this meeting, before adjournment, we can set those into place.
I was going to discuss that during office business, just as to bring it up, and I know Commissioner Bauman's been working on
We
this.
need to get everybody's assignments put into place, because the meetings they're starting, tomorrow is Ben Franklin Transit, and I do want to remain on that, because Commissioner Mullen has mentioned their budget has grown to 130 million.
139 million.
That's larger than our budget, and I'm wondering, how can a transit be bigger than a county government budget? That it sort of baffles me, and shows also the maybe the ability to get them to relinquish some of the 0.06 taxation that they're receiving, because I believe it is now up to 50 or 60 million just in the taxation.
That is
So,
correct.
We didn't have much going on, but I will say this morning when I went up to the shop building, the plow was out hitting Glade Road, and I appreciate the road department getting out there and clearing off that snow this morning.
All right. Thank you. Yes, kind of a short week last week, but spent the time going over the travel policy and the concerns out at the HAPO Center. But other than that, looking forward to having Commissioner Bauman on the board, and that's pretty much it. So we'll move on to public comment. You have 3 minutes if there's anyone that's interested.
Commissioners, I just want to take an opportunity. I know previously we've had an item on our agenda since I think about March. I think it was March 7th of last year, where electeds could have an opportunity to engage with the board as a board body. I don't know what happened. I know the board gets to set their agenda. This is a county commissioner meeting, but as an elected official, sometimes things do arise where we need to bring something to the board. We need to have a mechanism to be able to do that. And usually, I know the board has encouraged that if we had something like a presentation, when we were doing presentations in the past, the board has suggested if any department elected official has something that we could throw something on the agenda for a specific item, like if we need to present on a particular issue, whether it be proposed ordinances. I know we've had some issues where the sheriff's office has proposed some different ordinances within the county. Usually we want to have a separate line item for that. So I just want to pitch that out and see if there's an opportunity to have a process for that, so that we could put something or make a request of the board to have an opportunity where we can engage. Because typically under public comment, as this board has adopted the rule to simply hear the comments, versus the elected officials sometimes need to have more. We need to have an interaction with the board, especially if we have a pressing matter that needs to have approval for funding or other issues in our office. Sometimes things arise and we need to bring something to the board for the board to make that decision. So I'm just asking the board to make sure, I don't know if that was just an oversight, but give us an opportunity as elected officials to be able to engage with the board as a body. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
Good morning.
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 Got a couple of things for you. First, with the VEBA issue, Commissioner Bauman and Mr. Briggs in their dialogue kind of brought up a really good point. This resolution you guys passed today doesn't actually save a dime of taxpayer dollars as it's written. So if you feel that you're being compensated in excess of what's fair, just pay it back. There's nothing in the Constitution that prevents you from writing a check. Just pay it back. And if you do, let us know, because there's been considerable staff time spent on this, and I think the citizens need to know how much they're going to be getting back on that return. So the other issue, just to kind of echo what the prosecutor said, as you know, the legislative session has started. You may not know this, but the sheriff's office takes a very active role in tracking bills, testifying, meeting with legislators about bills. And there's two I want to bring your attention to. There's currently a bicameral bill that's going to, if passed, will restrict the public's right to choose their elected county officials. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but that obviously has huge implications for the citizens of Franklin County. There will be a bureaucratic, non-elected agency in Olympia that will be able to remove elected officials from office. So that would be an issue. The second one is a bipartisan bill that will divert state sales tax back to the local government for public safety use. That's an issue that's come up the last couple of years. What's nuanced about this year is there's actually a very similar bill that's also being floated by the Association of Cities and the city of Kent specifically, that will actually create for a new tax. Now, I'm sure if you took a straw poll in our county, we would much rather be able to divert sales tax from the state back to the local government as opposed to creating a new tax. So it's really important that we have that dialogue to make sure that the sheriff's office and the connections that we have are working with the commissioners and the connections they have to get on the same page with some of these bills. And one of the ways we can do that is that elected official department head time that used to be on the agenda. Time is of the essence on a lot of this stuff. Sometimes a good bill needs some assistance with traction, And if we can get on the same page, we can help that. And sometimes bad bills need to get killed before they gain traction. But timing is everything on this stuff, and we need to be able to engage in that dialogue. So I would just ask that you reinstate that item on the agenda so we can continue dialogue for the citizens of Franklin County.
Thank you.
Commissioners, just a comment on the VEBA. I see an easy solution for it. Lower your deductible. You're not getting any money back. You're paying actually. I actually did that because I didn't want to be accused of taking extra money. So I just lowered my deductible. I took the lowest deductible and I actually pay every month. I think that's an easy solution to the issue. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Anyone on the phone?
George Dockstetter, South Landing Road. I can't believe the three of you just approved to pay some dumbass architect $163,000, and we're going to build a building in Clovis that what? The Taj Mahal? Any metal building structure salesman could have designed the building and not charged you a damn dime. That's a real waste of our money for a building that 90% of the county is never going to see. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Hearing none. Move on to administrative office business. Mr. Gonzalez.
Chair, thank you. Primarily, I've been working with Commissioner Bauman on some of the potential boards he'd like to be a part of. So we've been discussing that offline. So if there's, Stephen, I don't know if you have your paperwork on you that you shared with me and Commissioner Didier. You've articulated some of the ones that you definitely want to be a part of. I've talked to Commissioner Bauman about the WASAC element, and he'd like to pick that up for sure. And we talked a little bit about it, Commissioner Bauman, perhaps, with the bus folks, if you'd like to be a part of that board.
Just looking at the different boards, Mr. Chairman, that you were a part of, I'd be happy to take the Ben Franklin Transit Board if you wanted to have some more time as chair to do that, but that's certainly up to you.
I'm fine if that's, if you would like that board, I'm good with that, so.
And what I can do, Chair Mullen, is work with you guys a little bit more offline. I've got a document that I've sent to each of you, and I'll resend it again this morning just so you have it again. And if I think the best way to handle it would be to tell me if there's any boards that you really want to remain on, and we can keep the status quo. I know Commissioner Bauman's gone through each one that he'd like to be a part of, so we can kind of figure out a methodology right now so we can fast track it, because I know there's some meetings that we've got going on. So if you guys have a good methodology that you've dealt with in the past to help move this process forward, I'm more than happy to facilitate that.
Mr. Chairman.
I think we need to look at what boards that Commissioner Peck was on and see if Mr. Bauman's interested in any of those. And at that point, if there's some that are a conflict with him, then we'll have to decide those other boards amongst ourselves, I guess.
That sounds good, because I know Commissioner Bauman and I were spending some time yesterday, and he's gone through all the ones that he's really interested in. Certainly I could share that, Commissioner Bauman. And
Yeah, share it with them, and I kind of went through and kind of looked at it and said, this is kind of what it looks like to me, and then shared it with him. So you guys look at it, and I don't think it's something that we have to vote on, right? It's just a...
No, not necessarily. I don't think, Sean, that it needs to be codified in any fashion or
Well, actually,
make a motion.
the bigger concern is the board is making a decision, it sounds like almost offline, the creation of like a serial meeting, but where you're getting
Right.
input from
And,
individual commissioners. I think from the continuation last week, the idea was to continue to this week, give Commissioner Bauman an opportunity to get on board, get everything going, and then there should be a decision in an open meeting of which assignments have been made. If there's a need for expedition, the board should probably just take a moment right now and make sure those assignments are made for the upcoming meetings between this week, or just finalize it. Because the concern is, if you're getting input from individuals, it's almost adopting that a decision has now been made offline, and all decisions should be made in this boardroom. And so I just want to
Right.
make sure
Yeah,
that,
and-
I know that's not the intent of the board. I'm just
Right.
trying to urge caution, as sometimes we're trying to do things for sake of convenience, and sometimes we overlook the fact that, hey, this is actually a decision being made outside of the meeting. So if you just take a few minutes, if there could be a correction, and just put that assignment out
So,
there for the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I suggest we take a recess so we could grab our notes and come back and make this decision in an open public meeting. And as far as my assignments, I'm good with everything that I'm on already, because I'm already familiar with the times and dates that I got to meet. I'd like to add the Ben Franklin Council of Governments as one of my responsibilities. But I also, we need somebody, because I was declined to be part of the crab board. So they declined me being on there, and I think one of you two need to apply to be on that crab board. We need somebody on that board.
Okay, so it sounds to me like if myself and Commissioner Didier are satisfied with the boards that we have already, and Mr. Bauman's interest is only of the Ben Franklin Transit, which is on my list, I'm happy to transfer that to him. And again, you said the crab board, I guess
Crab
would be
board,
the
very
only
important.
decision.
Yeah, and that's in terms of the crab board, I don't know if
transportation.
I don't know if I'd have to check to see if we actually have a seat for Franklin County, because my suspicion is that's a separate board selection process outside of, there is definitely a space for Franklin County. So let me check on that to make sure, because it was really, when the ad came out, they were looking across the 39 counties for someone who was interested to be on that crab board. So let me find out, and I'll figure out for sure.
So Chairman, my understanding of your proposal is that I would just assume the positions that Commissioner Peck had, and then
Transit.
plus the Ben Franklin Transit.
And Wasack. Oh, I guess he already had that.
He
so-
had Wasack.
So unless there's any other need outside of that, I don't see the need for a recess to
Okay.
go over them, but unless I'm missing something,
So Commissioner Didier would take BF cog, I would take the remainder of the assignments that Commissioner Peck had, and then I would also assume the Ben Franklin Transit Board in your stead.
I'm okay with that if
I'm okay with that.
Suits me.
this is good. All right, well,
Well,
Okay.
ironed out then.
Right, and what I'll do for the public is, Sean, what do you think the best procedure? I can get an updated list and present that next meeting, and should next meeting when we present, do we need to do an additional motion?
It'd
or-
probably be the best to just adopt it, once you're able to
Okay.
lay out for everybody's sake. But the decision has been made on the board, so everybody could take care of their assignments this week or the upcoming week.
Right.
But usually that is helpful just for the public's sake, because maybe there's
Absolutely.
interest on particular items, and that way they know which commissioner to speak about. If there's an issue that arises with county roads, with like crab board or other things, they know
Right.
which commissioner's assignment. So, yeah, just laying it
So
all
they can
out.
motion and approve today, and then I'll get an updated list for the
Right,
public.
right,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
thank you. Is there any need for executive session today?
Yes, sir, Chair, there is, and it is an executive session under RCW 42.30.11.0, Section 1, subsection I, potential litigation for, Daniel, would you say 10, 15 minutes? At least 15. Okay, let's say 15 minutes, Chair.
So at this point, we'll go into executive session, asking the board and county administrator and Mr. Stovin, is there anyone else that needs to be in on the meeting? The clerk of the board. For 15 minutes. Thank you. We've come out of executive session with no decisions being made. We're going to extend for another 15 minutes. Having come out of executive sessions with no decisions being made, is there any business for the good of the county?
No, sir, we are done. Thank you.
Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.